really in the same weekend, you married your wife and divorced your business.
I actually told next to no one for the first year of this business, which is kind of crazy. They might be bidding as much or more as us, but have a weaker quality score, and therefore we still outperform them in the paid search auction, despite the fact that actually we might be bidding less.
So I would say most entrepreneurs would be thrilled if they hit 7 figures in their first year. Certainly, I would be thrilled with it. But of course, with that comes a lot of stress. And on the show, we also don't talk a ton about drop shipping. There's a lot of original products, private label businesses. And so we have someone who has done all of these things and then, well, in theory, maybe failed at it. Oh, I don't like it. That's a strong word. I mean, they did get quite the payout. Well, we have Jayden Clark, who started a successful dropshipping business, scaled it to 1.5 million British pounds first year. Oh my gosh. Then sold it for £500,000, which he feels is low. And there's reasons. And the reasons are, well, it sounds like he burned out. I mean, that's tough, but that could be the reality. And so I want to talk through that experience with him. Jayden Clark, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited.
So, okay, you had a dropshipping business on Shopify. What year was this?
I started that in 2022.
2022. All right, so still in the bad times, still pandemic. What'd you sell?
So we sold, I suppose, high-end outdoor living, garden supplies, that sort of thing. So our customer avatar, if you like, was someone who loves having friends, family, etc., over in their garden, backyard, whatever you want to call it, and they want to have all the toys that can create a place that people want to be, a place they're proud of. So our average order value was probably close to about 5,000 British pounds when the business was sold. It wasn't uncommon for us to do orders in the sort of mid-teens, early 20s, if that was like bundles of things put together. So that was very much by design. The sort of model I followed, I suppose, and the course for inverted commerce success that had been charted before. We talked a lot about some of the problems with dropshipping could be solved by working with domestic kind of high-end proper manufacturers that allowed you to sort of run in inverted commerce. And I don't want to throw shade on any business model, but I think traditional dropshipping we all think about generally from China, generally
Right.
Without sort of a relationship with the manufacturer.
There's a lot of baggage with the word dropshipping.
Yeah. Whereas this was we had really deep relationships with some of our best manufacturers and suppliers, and they were, proper brands that we could be proud to sell. And we didn't have to wince every time something got fulfilled, fearing that it was going to turn up, wrecked or break after a matter of weeks, and there would be no sort of post-purchase support and that sort of thing. So that was a big part of it.
And at this time, this was a side hustle when it started. You had a corporate gig, right?
Indeed, yeah. It was never planned to be a side hustle in terms of the ultimate goal, but certainly it had to be done. I'm actually a pretty risk averse person, and the idea of burning the boats and going all in was unthinkable for me. And my sort of ballpark in my mind was that I wanted to be able to do 100K in revenue from roughly 30 transactions, because that's what felt in my mind. I felt that 100K in revenue would be roughly the threshold by which I would feel, and by that I mean 100K monthly revenue. About that point, I would start to feel confident that I had a business that could sustain me and my family. And I wanted to be able to get to that point while still working a full-time job, and 30 customers to give a good experience to felt like a reasonable amount. So that kind of gave me my rough average order value formula, right? I knew reasonably where that needed to be. And then beyond that, it was trying to find the right balance between an industry that was branded enough that there was some equity in some of the manufacturers that would allow me to generate some reasonable sales and traffic from some paid advertising to begin with, before the business had any sort of brand of its own or name of its own or organic traffic, but also that wasn't so saturated and competitive that the brands still needed to use retailers and sort of specialists in that sort of marketing and conversion to be able to go to consumer. And that was I looked at probably 20 or 30 different product sets. And garden supplies, I think, was on a bit of a journey whereby it was quite heavily dominated by physical premises before COVID. Suddenly people had to adapt to wanting to be outdoors in COVID, but not being able to physically go and look at these products in person. So suddenly the e-commerce side of the market was evolving, and it was a nice balance between kind of well-known brands that were reputable that you could work with, but that weren't quite yet so D2C that the value that could be added by a retailer had been diminished too far. So that's why it ticked a number of boxes, and that's why I dived in.
Certainly, if you're in anything that was like outdoor or even tangentially related to outdoor during that time, it really did pretty well. E-bikes and bikes in general come to mind as similar categories for similar reasons. Did you ever quit your job to pursue this full time, or did this stay a side hustle?
Doing both was pretty unthinkable at the time. So yeah, after just shy of a year, I was able to quit my job and go full time. I think that was probably a bit late in hindsight. But as I said, I'm a risk averse person, so I probably felt the need to see a pretty significant number within the context of my own life in the bank before I felt comfortable. My biggest fear by far was letting people down, having to let my wife down, and also, to be perfectly honest, the embarrassment of having to go back to work. I actually
Of course.
told next to no one for the first year of this business, which is kind of crazy because I was probably working about 40 or 50 hours on it.
So this store, geez, did we ever mention the name of this drop? What was the name of the store?
We called it Woodlark Garden Luxury.
So hitting seven figures in the first year, like really quite extraordinary, quite unusual, not something most people are going to be able to repeat. And a lot of factors went into that. What, as far as like driving awareness that early in the game is really tough. What do you think the acquisition channels, what that worked? What were some of the factors that helped drive this quick success?
Yeah, definitely. I think a few things. I think the first thing that was ideal was I was following, I suppose, kind of a charted path and a roadmap, which I think is actually when I'm best. I think I'm pretty good at executing. Ben Knegendorf is someone who sort of has a course on this sort of thing, helps people certainly excellent at that sort of 0 to 1 stage of the business. And I kind of had access to that. I bought into it very heavily. And I think I was able to quite quick. I always have quite an obsessive personality. So once I started seeing that I had this growth trajectory I could go on in terms of learning the strategies and the levers, and then I could get the feedback from implementing them and seeing business growth, that became quite addictive, and I was able to work hard on that.
And it was Ben Negendorf's was the
Yes,
source
yeah,
for
Ben
that?
Knegendorf. Yeah, in fact, I actually heard him on this very podcast, which
I
is
was
a
gonna
funny
say,
sort
I just had to Google my own show. He was on the show January 18th, 2022, and the
he
title of that episode is Ben's High Ticket Dropshipping Approach. I think his
that
th 3D
was
printers, yeah,
huge
he sold
moment.
3D printers. So again, it
That's
was
it.
like, you're right, it's high ticket item,
Mhm.
that's got, in his case, it was like it had a more technical approach to it, and he was able to get, develop relationships with the suppliers for those 3D printers at that time. Today
Yeah,
it's different.
and so I suppose going back to the original question of what really worked from a kind of customer acquisition perspective, it was being really strict. Well, the first things first is this is a demand capture business principally, right? So that I think is slightly easier to learn than sometimes demand generation. I think demand generation and convincing people who are maybe not even problem aware yet, definitely not solution aware, to be aware of the problem that your product solves and then aware that your product is the solution to the product they weren't aware they had. I think that requires a sophistication and a level of marketing, and then probably also a level of spend to be able to test and learn that sometimes demand capture doesn't quite in the same way. Whereas with demand capture, I was able to build a model, I suppose, where we leaned very heavily into organic SEO driven traffic at the top of the funnel and we were very focused on making sure that we were brilliant when it came to topical authority and informational keywords around our product types. And then coupled with that, being really competitive at the bottom of the funnel when it comes to paid advertising. And so we, over time with the business, essentially banded keywords as much as possible into what we felt their commercial value was to the business based on the intent they showed. And we would aim to be incredibly competitive on what we saw as really high purchase intent, low funnel keywords. Imagine we're selling a certain fire pit, a really low of the low in the funnel, high intent keyword might be something like, 2-meter concrete rectangular wood fire pit, for example. That is a customer who knows what size they want, what finish they want, what fuel source they want to put in it, all these things. Like, this is a customer who's primed to buy if we can show them the right product, the right experience.
So you're using you're going after these high intent, long tail keyword phrases. And then are these Google ads matched to landing pages, or like SEO landing pages, just trying to get that traffic to the store?
Predominantly Google ads based on those keywords with specific landing pages. Yeah. So we were very competitive SEO wise at the top of the funnel. More difficult for us as a newer domain to be competitive at these sort of very highly transactional keywords. We kind of began to get there towards the end, but predominantly we were hyper competitive on paid search for these high intent transactional keywords, and then highly competitive up the top of the funnel with more organic searches, because it's obviously incredibly difficult, especially when you have dropshipping margins, which are traditionally lower, to have a profitable ROAS on a top of funnel lower intent keyword. So working that organically was far more effective for our profitability. And then the bottom of the funnel keywords were the ones that we really identified had a high propensity to convert. And then we could be more competitive with the CPCs required to get that traffic, even with our dropshipping margins, because we knew we had the properly tailored landing page, the kind of right keywords in the ad campaigns to be able to make sure they converted the right rate.
That's very clever. So top of funnel, we're going organic because it's broader. It's not going to be nearly as profitable. And then bottom of funnel, we're doing these really high intent keywords. But by slicing it thinner, I would imagine you're getting better ROAS, potentially paying less than if using the broader terms at the top.
Indeed. And you can imagine, obviously, Google's a weighted auction, quality score and bid. And you can imagine if we're going hyper focused on individual keywords and we're creating landing pages that are hyper focused on those keywords, Google's perspective of what our quality score will be, and then also our user signals when customers get on those pages, help our quality score to be really high, which means that our bid doesn't need to be quite as high because our blended auction score of the two is higher because that quality score is so much better, versus one of our competitors who is maybe taking a more generic approach to keywords, and therefore their landing pages are less tailored. And therefore, when the customer gets on those landing pages, the user signals they send back to Google are poorer. They might be bidding as much or more as us, but have a weaker quality score. And therefore, we still outperform them in the paid search auction, despite the fact that actually we might be bidding less.
What's tremendous about this business is how quickly and how successful it was, and how rare and unusual that is. How did you interpret that success at the time? Were you like, hey, did it feel like, well, I'm putting in the effort, this is just how it goes, I'm a business genius? Or was it more like, the rocket ship has been ignited, I am now just holding on?
I would say first things first, I'm not very good at success. That's something I learned as part of this. It sounds a very negative thing to say. I actually think probably most of us aren't very good at success. I think most of us are kind of taught to be quite good at accepting our lot in life. And I actually think to want more and be satisfied when you get it is probably actually a skill that you have to learn.
So when did you sell?
So I had me and my wife got married. We did a legal wedding first because we were getting married out of the country. And so we just did a very simple spa day the next day to just try and, decompress and enjoy the fact that we'd done that. And I had a 90-minute massage that my wife had booked for me, which, with where my mindset and headspace was at the time, was like a real scary place to be. 90 minutes silence with my own thoughts was the opposite of a spa treatment for me. And so I was having this massage and my mind just raced the entire time. I was so nervous about the wedding, because at this time, the idea of it was a wedding weekend. We had our friends and family coming out. And I felt such an intense responsibility to my wife to be present, a good version of myself, not super stressed, not either checking my emails and being on the phone, or at the very least thinking about wanting to check my emails and being on the phone. And so I was so stressed about how I was going to do this because I was in so deep. And so I thought, this is actually a bit of a wake up call that this isn't really sustainable. I think it had been 6 months of going, actually, you've got this business to a really good level, but you have gotten past a little bit the point of no return, and you are trying to hire people and do things and put processes in place to extract yourself out of the business, and you are continually doing a poor job at it because you are just so burnt out and cooked. And actually, you know what? Let's take the exit. It's still a fantastic exit, and it's still going to give breathing room to learn, to think, and then to go again in business, whatever that might look like, from a position of a much better mental state. And so that was, in a nutshell, the conversation I had with myself in that massage. And I came out of it, and I got back into the spa area of my wife, and I said, I want to list the business for sale. And I messaged a friend of mine who had exited a similar business about 6 months earlier and said, please send me the details of the broker you used. And I reached out to him that night. And I think we had the business on the market, I don't know, maybe a matter of days or weeks later.
So you really, in the same weekend, you married your wife and divorced your business.
Yeah, but 2 brilliant decisions, actually.
So I will say, Woodlark still up, appears to still be up and on Shopify.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, they haven't by any means run it into the ground. In fact, I've really enjoyed working with them.
Did you mention how much you got for it?
I think you mentioned earlier, yeah, just above sort of £500,000, which obviously is maybe about $600K in dollars.
And how'd you feel about it? Too little? Enough? Too good?
This is so hard to say because I actually think it was the right amount. I think I left a huge amount of money on the table, 100%. It was a stepping stone in what I certainly view it this way, as a stepping stone in my career. And I think I'll look back at this and be like, that was fantastic, because it allowed me the space and breathing room to do some of these things. It allowed me the capital to do some of the things that I'll do next. And ultimately, yeah, great. It could have been $1 million, or it could have been, 7 figures or whatever on the exit. But actually, I think there will be future, whether they're exits or, whatever it might be, that happen because of what I learned from this business. So yeah, no, I can honestly say I have no regrets from the exit.
What did you do afterward?
In the lead up to the sale, I'd started speaking on podcasts, and I started speaking, I suppose, quite candidly. I think I was just at a point where there was no energy left for facade. I essentially spoke about both the good and the bad, and was really overwhelmed by the outpouring of people who would reach out to me after that and sort of say how glad they were. Because I think we all have this feeling that we sometimes have to put a facade of success up in business. That was really, really powerful. And so I basically decided I wanted to just start working with these people in some way. I just had coffees and, virtual coffees, chats with people who are in the same sort of position. And sometimes we talked about business. Sometimes we talked about the mindset side of business. And yeah, I found I loved it. I probably couldn't even really tell you what the business model is now. We have a membership that people can be a part of, but we also have a free part of the community. It's overall, it's called Founders Clubhouse. And
I was going to say, what's the name of it? It sounds cool.
It's called Founders Clubhouse, and it is essentially a space for predominantly new entrepreneurs, but indeed that, any that sort of feel like they are still fighting, which I imagine probably most entrepreneurs do, but sort of fighting their way through and struggle to have people in their life that sort of get some of those struggles.
My final question for you: where can we go and learn more about you?
So I've set up like a URL for the listeners of the podcast, which is just Founders Clubhouse, which is obviously FOUNDERS clubhouse.co.uk, and then /Kurt. That whole website of Founders Clubhouse is a good place to learn more. But to be honest, I would love it if your listeners did want to learn more, that they kind of do that by just reaching out. If people go there and want to chat to me, I'll be very happy.
Jayden Clark, formerly Woodlark Garden, now Founders Clubhouse. Thank you so much for your candor. This has been really great.
Thank you so much for having me.